Welcome to the Agency Navigators podcast by AgencyCFO. I'm Rome.
I'm Don.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Adam.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're always grateful that you take the time to listen to one of the many voices out there in our beloved industry. Along the way, and this goes back quite a few years for us, we came up with the term mid-agency mindset. It's a very much an agency CFO term. As insurance agencies grow and grow from scratch or startups or even larger ones and they acquire, however they grow, all of a sudden they're larger and they're not the little $500,000 revenue agency or even, sometimes even at $1 million, some of these theories start to creep in, especially over $2 million. You're in a mid-agency mindset. You got to think bigger. So we've decided to really hone in from time to time and talk about an element of the mid-agency mindset. So today's element is
sophistication of the financials. Generally, we're talking about, yes, the P&L or the income statement. And are they essentially granular enough? We'll explain all what that means.
There you go. Anything to quickly add, Kay or Adam, to that opening?
No, I think as you're growing and as you're scaling, the idea is, and I'm going to kind of put it in easy layman's terms. I don't know if that's a saying, but the idea is think about as you're scaling your revenue, there are different tax strategies you have to take at different income brackets and at different levels of that growth. The same idea is with your business and the accounting practices. There are going to be different strategies at different pieces. So it's exciting to come over to $1 million. Well, new strategies have to be implemented. How about the 2 million mark? There are certain levers where we have to make different strategic decisions when it comes to our accounting.
And in order to implement some of those strategies, you need to make sure you have the proper infrastructure. You need to make sure you have your data actually being stored the correct way so you can slice things down and actively execute those strategies.
The moral of the story is the larger the agency in revenue size, the more sophisticated will be the financials, the bigger the need and value proposition to be a little bit more granular, but don't go overboard. There is a point when too much is too much.
Well said. Well said. And obviously, this is near and dear to our heart. As we've mentioned many times, 2024 was the focus of our intelligence suite, the book of business. I think it's fair to say thus far in 2025, we've continued that work, but now added the layer of departmental financials to it.
Absolutely. And there's a time when an agency needs them, where the benefit, there is work involved, but the benefit far outweighs that effort.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So let's jump in and give an example of when is it. Let's start with just some quick examples. Why would an agency need departmental financials? Why do they need something granular?
Well, let's start at a very small agency, right? When we all started out, maybe we sold mainly personal lines. We did some commercial lines. And what do we see for small agencies, under $1 million? Oftentimes revenue is just revenue, right? We don't care. It's property and casualty revenue, whether it's personal, commercial. And when you're a really small agency, that's okay, right? It's revenue. It's all we care about. That's
you're
all
in the fight.
You're in the fight, How much revenue did we write? And how much revenue did we earn? And then we grow. And maybe we get to $1 million of revenue. And then we say, well, maybe we ought to know how much revenue came from personal lines and commercial lines. Maybe we did a little bit of life insurance, which is non-recurring, so we better break that out. Maybe we've dabbled in benefits. Maybe we ought to break that out. So as you grow, the first thing that happens is, do we understand how much revenue is being derived from each department? It's a natural step.
I was going to say natural. That was it.
That's a necessary evil. So think of it this way. If you don't do it at $1 million, you're going to have to do it at 2 million. So would you not rather do this in smaller chunks, meaning even if you separate out just your personal and commercial, You're going to have different carriers. Eventually your personal lines carriers are going to be different than your commercial. When you're just under $1 million, a lot of times, whether it's personal or commercial, you might be writing with the same large carrier. It's easy to track those commission statements. When you start to get more sophisticated with your carrier mix and where it's coming from, well, hey, there's a need. There is no ability to ignore it or just keep doing things the same.
And absolutely, that is spot on. And as your agency grows and grows, the layer of sophistication, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and every million you add, you're looking to add service. You're looking to add service team members, admin members, team members. Well, if you're going to hire someone and you want to go after a little larger commercial lines, so you need to hire a service person who will understand how to serve those larger commercial lines. Do your numbers back it up? Well, having the departmental financials, you're going to be able to know.
Yeah.
Will it pay for it? How does that look in terms of your staffing breakdown? You can even take it farther because we're still in best practice season. When you go to submit best practices, they want to know what's your allocation for team members in the department.
So the industry standard is to break revenue into personal lines, commercial lines, and benefits is the top line, is the buckets.
Okay. So now we have a sense of when and how it should be done.
I don't know if you said life insurance. Did you say life?
Or a little earlier, but that's a good reminder. Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
think part of that is because that's generally one-time revenue. So if you're not extracting that, that's, very good to know when it comes to budgeting and forecasting how much recurring revenue we'll have.
Mhm.
All right. So a lot of you are listening to this and saying, well, that's easy. You've done that. You're well past that.
And why is Adam on the call? We know why.
Because the second part becomes a lot more difficult. Is at what point should we departmentalize expenses?
Yeah. I mean, I always, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to data, you always want to try to collect as much as possible and get as granular as you possibly can. Because trying to add granularity later on in the process can be really tough. If you don't have things broken down into those departments, breaking them out and then trying to add more intricacy after that you're just starting to compound the work that needs to be done in order to get, to the final step.
Notice right now we're talking departments, and we're going to address, there's a whole lot of you out there that say, yeah, I want to see it by department. I want to see it by office. I want to see it by this. I want to see it by that. We'll get there. But right now we're talking about, should we departmentalize our expenses? And if we have departmentalized revenue and we departmentalize our expenses, what can we generate? Yes, we can generate a profit and loss or an income statement by department, and we can understand the profitability of each and every department within the agency. So Kayla, why might we want to do that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one is transparency. I think more than anything, I ask myself, why is it important to see this? Well, I'm going to beat Ro to the punch. This is one of her favorite topics, as as an executive advisor talking about your management team, well, you're giving them the keys to the castle. Here's exactly how your department is being impacted. And here's the financial clarity that you need in order to hold yourself accountable, your people accountable. And when you ask for more money, or you ask for more money for your team, or you ask for more team members, well, there's a pretty clear answer of whether or not we can afford it based on that department's revenue and allocation of service.
You said it better than me, Kay. Go for it. You got it.
All right, let's try this one on. If you're an owner listening to this, one of your biggest frustrations is likely this. My managers don't think like owners. They don't make decisions as if they were owners. My department managers don't do so. If they don't have a department financial,
how are they supposed to?
They don't know. They don't know any different. They can't see the results of their actions because they don't have a complete picture.
All right. So let me play the other side for all of you. Well, wait a minute. I don't want them to know the dollars. I don't want them to see dollar amounts. And I'm really nervous about that. How many times have we heard that?
Every time we recommend it.
What do we do instead?
Well, at least minimally, we can share percentages. So are we making 5% profit margin, 10, 20? Well, that's pretty relevant.
How does it compare to Reagan Big Eyed benchmarks? Are we on track for that? We have a really cool visual graphic that we came up with years and years ago. We've used it for masterminds. We've used it for annual client meetings. When they meet with their team members, it's called the value of a dollar. We actually have a visual dollar bill with the benchmarks of percentages split out, and we compare it to the agency's dollar bill. And we can see where they're overcompensating or a little bit more on selling expenses, but maybe less on admin expenses. How does that affect the percentage of profitability? It has been so key in us teaching agencies managers on how to understand this.
Now, there's the likelihood, let's say you did have departmental financials, or what do we normally see? Are they valuable? Well, in most cases, what you will find is there's one department that's going to be significantly more profitable than another. So what you end up with is one segment of your agency is likely subsidizing other less profitable areas of the agency. And you probably intuitively know that, but seeing it in black and white and to what extent it is very valuable. The dynamics of a personal lines department are often quite different than the dynamics of a commercial line. And I'll give you a great example is oftentimes we see fairly large personal lines departments run without any true producers versus commercial lines departments that have heavy sales teams.
Producers are expensive.
Absolutely. And all of a sudden, when you compare the compensation of the two different departments, they're vastly different. And it goes right to the bottom line. But seeing that for real puts everything into perspective, and it will cause your managers to manage potentially differently.
I do think there's a good point to putting it to a percentage. It's not just how much transparency you want to have, but it's also evening the playing field between all departments. Don just brought up a great point. The compensation to revenue, when we're talking dollar figures, may never be the same between personal and commercial because the level of expertise that's needed for that seat, especially larger commercial sales. However, the percentage of revenue and how much compensation you're paying, well, that can be shared and that can be justified across the board and compared against best practice. If you've ever looked at a best practice study, they very rarely have ever published actual figures. It's a percentage of revenue because that's a lot easier to measure and scale across the board. So keep it high level.
From our experience, it's a very small minority of agencies that actually do produce full financial statements at the departmental level, a departmental P&L or income statement.
Yet we see a need, which is why it's been a huge focus.
And the reason why? It's work. It's work for your accounting department. It's easy to get wrong. How do you allocate certain overhead expenses?
There's a level of experience and expertise needed. So now looking at the right resources at the right time to accomplish it, back to that mid-agency mindset, at what point do you undertake this, and the who of that is when we were chatting and prepping for this, Kay, I think you brought out, when do you have the controller or the CFO versus an outside service like ours that we are focusing on it?
Absolutely. I think knowing the right time to insource or outsource, I always consider A, revenue, and 2, the needs of your agency. Meaning, are you a heavy agency bill agency? Do you do a lot of niche business where you're never going to escape the agency bill life? Is that something that'll eventually turn down the road? You have to consider all the factors of your accounting and revenue situation. And a lot of times, I don't think it's right or wrong necessarily to insource or outsource, but just know that they both come with their own pros and cons. meaning inside, you might have to have some level of owner oversight to help that person, support that person. Even for agency CFO, we consider there's a revenue point where it makes sense to even add us to your own payroll or to your expense structure. And it's because it doesn't make sense to add us too early. You might just need a really great bookkeeper who can, do the reconciliation, do the commission tracking, and those fundamentals. It's really, I would say, is past the 1.5 million is where you might start to really need a CFO, a controller at a small scale. Start looking for a resource that can add strategy on top of the monthly reconciliation. It's like making a really good sandwich. You just have to keep adding the layers until, you get the full bite.
And then to add our layers when we added Adam. And that's, we added the layer of the intelligence suite and the dashboards and the book of business. And now that's really running beautifully. And it's been so well adopted that now, Adam, you're digging into some of the departmental setups. Why don't you speak a little bit to some of the work you've done? Without naming names of our agency partners, you've been in the weeds.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And like you said, that's a process that takes a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. It's a multi-step, intricate process. And, trying to do it can take hours on top of that, even with having all of that knowledge and expertise. So we've been putting a lot of work and effort into being able to automate that process, to be able to take those hours that you would spend trying to do all that work. And instead, you can turn it and you can spend those hours actually analyzing the data and finding, those small revenue leaks. Because obviously, expense management is, it's a key part in optimizing your revenue. So, like you had mentioned earlier, sometimes, just looking at that 50,000 level, a very high level look at just the overall bottom line isn't going to show you where your leaks are. Departments are subsidizing the other ones. Figure out how to plug up some of those leaks. Try to make it so each of your departments is, successful from a revenue basis. Then you don't have to worry about that subsidizing. And then the growth, just keeps going from there. So, the process we built essentially takes those few hours and in just a few moments can essentially take the hay away, so you can just focus on the needles.
That's cool. That's a good one. Because really, when it comes down to it, if you start, let's really dial it back just a step. For our smaller agency partners, if you start personal lines, commercial lines, maybe benefits, life/health, or however you do those initial breakdowns and grow on the revenue side, then you start thinking about the expense side all the way up to, this is a trivia question for Don and Adam, of our most complex agency partners, because we run the whole gamut. What's the most complex? How many departments have it broken down to?
We've had more. We've got a special one who runs 13, 7 or less. Generally, most agencies can run. The vast majority can run within 4 departments.
And then ultimately, the way we're going to wrap this up is, we're all for it. Start as early as you can in your agency's life cycle, so to speak. But also along the way, you need to monitor, audit, and adjust.
Absolutely.
Because if the allocations are wrong,
then you're going to come to the wrong conclusions. And this is where Agency CFO can really help you. We can we can minimize the effort, and we can maximize the value proposition, which you're going to gain from the effort. Mm-hmm. And that's why so few agencies do this. But it is a blind spot. It's an opportunity for a lot of agencies. But get help. If you get help, you can make this a lot easier and a lot more beneficial.
Thank you all. Kayla, Adam, any closing statements? I'm leaving his where it is because it was perfect in my
well said.
All right. Thank you for joining us. As always, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Reach out. You can email, is it podcast@AgencyCFO, Adam?
Yep, it is.
Reach out to us. We want the feedback. If you have ideas for us, please let us know. We're here to help you be better. And that's what it comes down to.
In this age of growing sophistication, you have to ask yourself, are your financials sophisticated enough? All right, be financially wealthy.
Bye-bye.